Hello, we're here to look at Commonhold, a form of property ownership that the government prefers to leasehold. We'll look at why it's under review, what is proposed by way of reform, and the implications for those who own and operate leasehold sites. Matt, could we start by looking at what Commonhold ownership is and why the government and others perceive it as having advantages over leasehold?
Thanks, Emma. Commonhold is a form of ownership alternative to leasehold, rather than having the landlord and tenant, where the landlord owns the freehold and the tenant owns the leasehold. Everybody within a commonhold owns part of the freehold. That ownership stems from participation in and membership of the Commonhold Association, which is the equivalent of a landlord, but is totally a commonhold unit owner controlled. There is no landlord equivalent as such. As and when an owner of a commonhold unit sells on their commonhold, they then are no longer a member of that company, and the company itself, or the membership of the company itself, passes on to their successor. The government sees commonhold as preferable to leasehold, because leasehold is, by its very nature, a wasting asset. It's for a fixed time, and the longer you get through that term, the tenant has to either re-enfranchise or has to extend the term by some other means. It's also has built into it an adversarial position between the landlord and tenant, which the commonhold doesn't. And that adversity leads to things such as opaqueness of service charges and potential punitive fees for tenants, which aren't built into the commonhold system.
Right, so it seems like Commonhold offers a number of advantages to tenants over leasehold, yet there's been very little uptake of Commonhold since it was first introduced. It was introduced back in 2002, and since then I believe only around 20 or so developments have been registered as Commonhold, the majority of those being relatively small sites between 6 and 30 units. Why has uptake been so small, and what's prompted the government's renewed interest in Commonhold?
I think back in 2002 it was a new product that wasn't marketed greatly, and there wasn't an inertia for change, so there was a lack of demand from the new market. Buyers of new flats weren't driving to ask developers and their lawyers to give them commonholds rather than leaseholds. As rather than new build, there was also complexity in converting an existing leasehold to a commonhold. You required 100% agreement between all of the tenants, which is virtually impossible to obtain. There's also problems, or perceived problems, in the protection of the security that any mortgagee has, in that should the Commonhold Association enter into liquidation or some kind of insolvency arrangement, then the mortgagee's interest is effectively evaporated. And there's also a lack of flexibility in the model, in that it doesn't accommodate mixed use or mixed tenure schemes, so that you can't deliver affordable housing or you can't deliver retail or something like that through the scheme. The government's antennae came onto this issue probably 3.5, 4 years ago, due to various unfair practices in the leasehold housing market, mainly around the issues of leasehold houses and extremely fast increase in ground rents that were being charged both in leasehold houses and in flats. So the government tasked the Law Commission with investigating where these barriers have existed. The Law Commission then issued a consultation back in December on that, canvassed opinion, and then has come out with the recommendations.
Okay, so what's being proposed now in relation to Commonhold?
Well, they've obviously identified the barriers and have tried to remedy those that I've just discussed. Firstly, they're trying to simplify the creation of Commonhold to make it less daunting to both current leaseholders who want to convert or to the new build industry that may be thinking of using it. They've increased flexibility in the Commonhold so that it will now accommodate, or that their proposals will allow it to accommodate mixed tenure, mixed use, delivery of affordable housing and shared ownership. They've tried to balance the competing priorities between a new developer setting up a commonhold who wants some flexibility in the way that he or she delivers their development, and also the protection for the commonhold unit owners going forward, so that they're not constantly constrained by a developer who is then replaced by a landlord. And to deal with the mortgagee or the perceived mortgagee problems, they've increased the enforcement powers for commonhold associations. So then they have a much more rigorous enforcement regime against non-payment of things such as service charge. And also they've suggested building in lender security arrangements, such as on an event of insolvency, postponing the Commonhold Association being struck off the Companies House register. Taking the consultation one step further, the Select Committee for Housing, Communities and Local Government for the House of Commons has said that the government should try and ensure that Commonhold becomes the primary model of the delivery of flats for England and Wales.
Okay, so on the one hand, we have the Select Committee taking a strong position in recommending that the government ensure that Commonhold become the primary method of ownership for flats. And sitting alongside that, on the other hand, we have the Law Commission, which has set out a number of fairly detailed technical legal reform proposals. What does all that mean for those who own and operate leasehold sites? What do they need to do and watch out for?
At the moment, we don't know. The requirement that we must have is to just keep a watching brief, and where the opportunity arises, give comment and replies to any consultations that are out there. In terms of timescale, the government and the Law Commission have 2 months to come back on the Select Committee report. The Law Commission have then said that they will be issuing a final report with draft legislation in autumn of 2019, although I have heard on the grapevine that that may move out to spring 2020. In terms of what the commentators are saying, some more pro-tenant commentators are saying that the reforms suggested by the Select Committee are necessary and that there will be tenant take-up on that, and they cite examples from other European jurisdictions where there has been such take-up. Other industry professionals say that such an approach would be a more draconian method that could be adopted, and whilst they accept some reform is necessary, it doesn't need to be as full on as the suggestion that the Select Committee has made. And they cite that the fact that the Select Committee's proposal doesn't take into account the impact that it would make on a mixed use development with the lack of consultation in the commercial property market, and also the fact that it would create a two-tier market with the legacy leaseholds becoming a potentially blighted system going forward, whereas Commonhold may become seen as a premium product. So for now, people should sit tight and watch and be aware of what's going on, but we still have to await others' comments first.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.